Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and I was debating, umming and ahhing whether I was going to talk about this topic or not, but I feel it is literally the front page of the news at the moment, and I wanted to just get people who maybe aren't too familiar up to speed and give my take on it as well. I want to preface it with a few things. First of all, you might be able to tell from the sound of my voice, I currently have a cold. I know, a cold in the summer. The irony is not lost on me, so please bear with me. Also, when dealing with stuff like this, obviously the topic we're going to discuss today is of a very disturbing nature. It might upset some viewers. It details allegations of explicit photographs, sexual photographs basically, towards people who are under the age of 18 at one point in time. So for anyone who doesn't want to delve into this topic, who doesn't want to hear about this, then this is your warning essentially to click off the video now. So as you might be aware, in the news recently over the last few days, it's been noted that a BBC presenter faces new allegations over explicit photos. Now, this was first published by The Sun newspaper, and it details how allegedly a BBC presenter, they haven't been named, but is, I don't know whereabouts, but it is presumed to be male, or it's mentioned that they're male. A male BBC presenter has been alleged of being in communication with and sending explicit photographs to another young person who this started when they were 17 and they are now 20. And this was made by the mother of said young person, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to get into here. I mean, it says here, the allegations, which were first reported by The Sun, are that the presenter paid £35,000 for explicit photos over a 3-year period. The young person's mother told the paper their child, now aged 20, had used the money from the presenter to fund a crack cocaine habit, and that if the alleged payments continued, her child would end up dead. Obviously, that is a very serious, a very worrying allegation. It has major implications, obviously reflecting on the alleged victim, regarding having a crack cocaine habit. That's obviously very destructive, very dangerous, and also on whoever the presenter is in doing this in the first place. It's been quite the roller coaster, really, over the past few days, trying to catch up with this story, trying to analyse this story. There's been a lot of, obviously, discussion within the media industry itself. You have the government weighing in as well. For example, a senior Tory MP and the chair of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee said it's vital that TV companies have in place the right systems and processes to ensure their stars who have disproportionate power and influence over the lives and careers of others don't abuse it. The BBC has been accused of being very lacking on this sort of stuff. But in terms of the presenters they do have on the roster, a lot of them have already come under fire from people on social media, basically accusing them. For example, presenters such as Ryland Clark, Jeremy Vine, Nikki Campbell, and Gary Lineker. Now, all of these presenters are presumed to be innocent, as even on the BBC website, it says it's a disconcerting time for them when they have no involvement in the allegations. I guess you can figure it out because the BBC have now said the presenter in question has been suspended as pending the investigation of these allegations, and all of the presenters that I just mentioned are still currently working or producing shows and stuff like that. So, it's clearly a presenter who's not on air at this time in any form, TV or radio. More so as a handy timeline of events, I suppose, of what's going on here. So it says, on Friday the 19th of May, the young person's family complained to the BBC about the behaviour of one of its presenters. This is according to The Sun. The BBC investigation team begins looking into the matter, according to the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie. So if this was the first time the complaint was logged, again, I think originally The Sun or some articles were claiming that the BBC didn't really investigate it. However, the Director General is saying opposite to the contrary. Only, those involved will know the truth of this. Then a few weeks later, on Thursday the 6th of July, new allegations of a different nature are put to the BBC, according to the corporation's account. This one's a bit more vague. So, the first one's saying the family's just complaining about the behaviour, and yet 2 weeks later we're getting allegations of a different nature. It's not really clear whether it's, of a different nature. It implies that the complaint that was put on the 6th of July is a lot more serious. And not just 2 weeks later, sorry, this is the cold brain. This is 2 months later, nearly. It's a long time after. Then on Friday, the 7th of July, The Sun's first story is published on Friday night, with the mother's claims that a BBC presenter paid their child tens of thousands of pounds for explicit photos over 3 years. The paper quotes the mother as saying the young person used the money to fund a crack cocaine habit and that she was worried her child would end up dead. The young person sends a WhatsApp message to the paper on this evening, so Friday the 7th, denying those claims, saying their mother's statement was totally wrong and there was no truth to it. This was according to a letter from the lawyer. Now that's a twist in the tables. We'll come to that in just a second. The BBC says it treats any allegations very seriously, and if it receives information requiring further investigation, steps it takes include actively attempting to speak to those who have contacted us in order to seek further detail and understanding of the situation. It adds, if we get no reply to our attempts or receive no further contact, that can limit our ability to progress things, but it does not mean our inquiries stop. If at any point new information comes to light or is provided, including via newspapers, this will be acted on appropriately in line with internal processes. And that is true. In stories like this, it's completely up to the victim whether they want to come forward with their story. Some find that a lot easier than others. I can't imagine it's a very easy thing, in situations like this. If again, this is all allegations, but if you're trying to come out against someone who, as mentioned, has some sort of like power or influence, that can be a very daunting thing to do, even if you are in the right. But again, this is all allegations currently at the time I'm recording this, want to stress that. And then the next day on Saturday the 8th, The Sun publishes more allegations, quoting the mother as saying the presenter was pictured in his underwear ready for my child to perform for him. So again, even more damning allegations now, saying that more of these sexually explicit photos and stuff like that. And I'm just this is where some of my 2 cents come in. Then on Sunday the 9th, the BBC says it has suspended a male member of staff and is working as quickly as possible to establish the facts in order to properly inform appropriate next steps. It's important that these matters are handled fairly and with care, and the BBC says it's been in touch with the police. The Met has said it has received initial contact from the BBC in relation to the matter, but no formal referral or allegation has been made. The Sun reports, again, time back to the Sun, the presenter allegedly made 2 calls to the young person and asked them, "What have you done?" and appealed to them to call their mother to stop the investigation. Now, again, that's a very damning statement, or a very damning allegation that this presenter has now, called to say. And, it's very much within the realms of possibility if this is true. A presenter who is worried they're going to get outed, panics and tries to call it off. But again, that's the tricky thing with this. At the moment, again, the time I'm recording this, which is early on the 11th of July, a lot of this is all just speculation, it's allegations. We haven't really progressed. Then on Monday the 10th, Downing Street says it is right that this is looked into carefully. There is transparency at the appropriate time. Rishi Sunak says he has full confidence in Mr Davey as Director General. Representatives from the Beeb meet detectives from the Met Specialist Crime Command, and the Force says it's assessing information from the BBC, but there's no investigation at the time. In a letter to the BBC, now this was the big bombshell, the lawyer representing the young person who's at the centre of the allegations disputes their mother's account of events, saying the allegations reported in the Sun newspaper are rubbish. The letter claims the young person sent the newspaper a denial on Friday, as we mentioned, but it proceeded to publish their inappropriate article. In response, The Sun says it reported a story about 2 very concerned parents who made a complaint to the BBC about the behaviour of a presenter and the welfare of their child. Their complaint was not acted upon by the BBC, and it has seen evidence that supports their concerns, The Sun says, adding it's now for the BBC to properly investigate, and the parents tell The Sun that they stand by their account. In an article The Sun published on Monday evening, the stepfather is quoted as saying allegations were put to the BBC for an hour, and it appears to contradict a previous statement on Monday's edition, which stated the family say no one from the corporation rang them for a proper interview after the initial complaint. So, again, if it appears to contradict, this is where the holes start to form. Earlier it said that no one from the Beeb rang them for an interview about this initial complaint. However, now the stepfather is saying these allegations were put to them for an hour. So it's now starting to read a little bit murky. Very bold of the Sun to say, even though the lawyer of the young person in question, so, this who is relaying this young person's thoughts or messages they want to communicate, if you have their lawyer saying that these claims are baseless and they're a load of rubbish, and yet the Sun still published this, they sent a denial and the Sun still published this. I mean, I don't know much about the newspaper trade. I'm not a journalist. I'm not part of that. But to me, an ordinary member of the public, that seems like a gross act of conduct there. The article also reports that the stepfather went to police about the matter but was told they couldn't do anything as they said it wasn't illegal. Now, just to break down some laws here in the UK, I know this is different depending on the country. The age of consent in the UK is 16. However, you are not legally classed as an adult until you are 18. If you are under 18, you are still classed as a child. So I think the key thing in this case would be these supposed, sexual photos that were sent by a presenter. If the young person was 17 as alleged when these photos began, if they were under 18, legally they are still a child, and legally that could be construed as, say, grooming, like grooming an underage person, and if the young person sent photos of that nature back, then that could be construed on the presenter's end as being in possession of CP. I think you all know what that stands for. And the thing is as well, if the police go and interview, say, the young person who's at the heart of this, the alleged victim, right? Because that's what it all hinges on. The accusations say it's over this 3-year time period from when they were 17 up until the age of 20. Now, from 18 onwards, legally, and I stress that legally, you could argue that there is no lawful wrongdoing, because from 18 onwards that person is an adult, and if they have clearly consented in the evidence to receiving photos of this nature or sending photos of that nature back, then there is nothing that the police can do from that standpoint. However, if the young person received sexual photos from a presenter at the age of 17, now, if the young person might say, well, I was 17, but again, it's just a hypothetical this, but they could say, I consented to it, I was okay with it. However, again, big stress, even if they say that is still breaking the law. The police would say that as may be, you may feel that way, but the law states if you receive this material, underage, then it could be construed as grooming. It breaks the law. So the key thing that we don't know yet, that we need to ascertain, is if this did happen, if these accusations are true, if evidence comes out to support it, the key thing will be analysing the dates of when this took place and just how old this individual was when they were supposedly receiving said photos. And then on Tuesday, the 11th of July, the BBC is due to publish its annual report, which was in the diary before the allegations became public, and the Director General traditionally hosts a press conference, which is likely to be dominated by the story this year. Yeah, a bit of bad timing for that as well. Just to touch on the BBC for a second, I don't think I need to emphasise too much how damning this is for the corporation if this comes out to be true. And even just the allegations are damning as well, because you might remember 10 or so years ago, you had the whole issue with people like Jimmy Savile, and it was revealed during the 60s, 70s, 80s, the whole ring of misconduct and horrible things that happened under the BBC's roof that were either just allowed to let slide or weren't picked up upon, all that sort of stuff. So even now, over 10 years after that came out, quite rightly after that came out, and the BBC got a lot of blasting for it, they've always sort of been dogged by that. Detractors of the BBC will come back to that, which, they're within their right to do. That did happen. It was a gross misfailing on the BBC's part, especially back then. So something like this, if this turns out to be true, if some evidence does come forward, then again, that will massively impact the BBC's trust amongst the nation, maybe even across the world. But again, this is all very murky at this time of writing, because you've got the son and the parents of this person saying that this did happen, that they've got evidence that hasn't yet been published for whatever reason, and then you've got the young person, or at least the lawyer of the young person, who you'd like to think is relaying their thoughts, saying that this is rubbish, they tried to send a denial to the son. So you've got basically two opposing sides going at each other, and the BBC's caught in the middle. Just on the live update feed on the BBC page itself, which is keeping people up to date with developments in this story, there's an interesting thing here from an ex-Sun editor. So this is Kelvin McKenney, who edited The Sun between 1981 and 1994, and he believes the BBC presenter at the heart of the allegations will never be named, not now that a lawyer representing the young person has disputed the mother's account of events. He said, "I have never believed that the presenter will be identified now. Once that statement was made, it ended the chance of a court action, somebody being charged in relation to this one way or the other. The young person has said that nothing inappropriate or unlawful happened, therefore there is no evidence and there is no witness, so that's the end of that." He added, "That now leaves the presenter with an issue. The presenter says, I haven't done anything wrong, and therefore I want my job back. They won't get their job back, but what will be even worse for the corporation, and worse for Tim Davie, again the Director General, and his management, is the idea that they're going to get a severance. And that I see as the biggest problem now looming on the story, that eventually the staff presenter receives license fee payers' money to essentially go away. I sort of understand where he's coming from. Now you've had the smoking gun of the young person saying that basically this is all rubbish, this didn't happen. So, how can a case progress when the alleged victim is saying that, it's all nonsense? There is also, and it's really bugging me because I now can't find it, but on one of these articles from the BBC or one of the news outlets, I think it's in the lawyer's letter actually that the lawyer sent to the media for the young person, that it points out that the young person and their mother, the main one who put these things to the son, are estranged. So if they're estranged, that implies, they're not talking frequently, they're not on good terms for whatever reason or whatever. And if that's true, again, that raises a whole another boatload of questions as to why, if that is true, why is the mother doing this? Are their intentions good? Are their intentions bad? We don't know. We don't know anything. Another update on this says it's difficult to see where the son takes this, and this comes from Mark Stevens, who's a media lawyer. He says there's a legitimate public interest in parents expressing concern about their offspring. However, he adds it's important to remember in this case that the young person is 20 years old, now they are, and can make their own choices, saying it's their decision how to take this forward. It's difficult to see where the son takes this now, he continues, in light of the young person having their own lawyer and stating there is no criminality, no wrongdoing. For the BBC's part, Stevens says he believes there will be an inquiry by the corporation's Director General into how this happened. And obviously, there are numerous people who do know the identity of this presenter who's sort of been at the heart of this. Obviously, you'd think the alleged victim would, the parents, numerous members now of the BBC who have had to suspend that staff member. It's unclear whether the son knows, various government people know. And, then you might be asking, well, Adam, if people know who this is, in fact, it's just been updated right now as I'm recording this video. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, hasn't been told who the BBC presenter is. And you might think, why on earth would some people like the Prime Minister, why, if the Sun knows, why don't they publish? If these people know, why don't they publish? There's a very fine line. Defamation laws here in the UK, I believe, are very strict. And I'd also watch what people are posting on social media, yourself included, if you're joining in on that conversation. With defamation laws here, you've got to be very careful. At this time, again, these are allegations. They have not been corroborated. No evidence has been published to the public. The parents claim they've seen evidence to back this up. We haven't seen that. The public hasn't seen that. That's not been released to the media. So these are allegations. To publish the presenter, if this turns out to be not true, could be hugely damning. And there's already been people on Twitter, again, the presenters I mentioned earlier, like Rylan Clark, Jeremy Vine, Gary Lineker, all these people going after them, basically accusing them, saying that, hey, it's you. And this is incredibly damning. And on social media, you can get done for it. It's not just a case of losing like your Twitter account or whatever. If the presenters wish to, they could take it to a very high level. They could sue you. They could, basically leave you in financial ruin because they could sue you for damages. And I know that sounds very extreme. You might think, oh, well, I'm one person out of many on social media. What's the chances that the presenter is going to come after me specifically for stuff I say? Well, I mean, if that's your view, that's fair enough. But I mean, do you want to take that chance? My view on this is, I think we just need to wait and see where this goes. Whether or not a presenter does get named now is anyone's guess. It all seems to be at some sort of stalemate because, again, you've got the two sides clashing with each other. You've got the parents saying this wrongdoing happened. You've got the young person saying there was no wrongdoing, there was no criminality. So it's all very, very murky. But the longer this goes on, this just continues to do more damage to the BBC. The BBC, even though it has to report on itself as an impartial organisation, you can tell that they don't like doing it. They have to lead with the story because it's the biggest thing, but they don't want to report on themselves. They want to focus on other news stories, other things. So the longer this drags on, the more damage it's going to do to the BBC as a whole. I just want to round off by saying I don't want any of you to feel like you shouldn't go after anyone. Again, these are allegations at this point in time. I'm recording that the story's still developing. We should not be pointing fingers saying, this was you or anything like that, because that is very dangerous, very bold and bad to do, I think, at this point in time. If the presenter is named, whether that's leaked or whether the presenter comes out, they want to tell their side, or whether, if it comes out, basically, if this presenter is named, I would still err on the side of caution, because even though that presenter is named, again, at this point in time, until any sort of evidence comes out to lean one way or the other, these are allegations. And yes, they should be investigated. The BBC should be looking into, what the hell's been going on and trying to ascertain what's been going on. But equally, other news outlets, The Sun included, should be digging deeper to get the true facts of the story. And in my mind, again, I'm not in the mind of the young person or any of the people involved directly in the heart of this story. None of us are. But the way I see it from an outside view, if the young person in question has, via their lawyer, granted, but if they have said that there is no truth to these claims, there is no criminality, no wrongdoing, it's nonsense, then surely you would, we all talk about believing victims. If we're going on this, you would like to think them saying that nothing happened. Again, I'm not saying that is true. We don't know what's true. That's why this is so I ummed and ahed about this, right? Because I was like, what's the point in discussing this? Because I'm going to go back and forth on saying, well, we don't know about this. And I've done that for a lot of this video, and I appreciate it might be frustrating, and I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to put myself to one side or the other at this time, because we just don't know. We don't have the evidence. We don't have the information to corroborate one side or the other. And it's been like that every stage. When it first came out, I thought, right, okay, these allegations are pretty damning, pretty serious. The BBC needs to investigate this. We need answers. But then the minute that other side came out, the young person saying it didn't happen, that was like, whoa, okay, now we're in a real stalemate. So yes, very unclear how this story is going to unfold. Is it just going to fade away? Is it going to persist until more strict answers are going to happen? And again, what's going to happen to the presenter? As mentioned, they are suspended currently. It's tough. I don't know what the BBC is going to do on this one, to be honest. The Director General, Tim Davie, went before a press conference, and he's been interviewed since, obviously, about this whole situation. We didn't learn too many more details about the ins and outs of it. We did learn some timeline details, though. Namely this, I just want to highlight this. It says BBC made only 2 attempts to contact the complainant. And this was posted by the BBC, by the way. And it says, so on the 18th of May, the complainant, the family member, attends a BBC building to make a complaint about a BBC presenter. The following day, the 19th of May, the complainant contacts BBC Audience Services. The details are referred to the BBC's Corporate Investigations team. That same day, the team emails the complainant seeking additional information. There was no response. Then, around 2.5 weeks later, on the 6th of June, having received no response to the email, a phone call was made to the mobile number provided by the complainant. This call did not connect. And then it says, the timeline says no additional attempts to contact the complainant were made after the 6th of June. However, the case remained open throughout. And you can look at this from both sides. On one hand, okay, the person's made the complaint, they've provided an email address, they've provided a phone number, and yet in the attempts for the BBC to contact them, they haven't responded. So, you could ask the questions to those family members as to, why didn't you respond? If this was so serious a thing, why weren't you providing the BBC with more information? Why weren't you speaking to them? You could go down that route. But also I'd argue the BBC arguably maybe could have contacted them more than twice. Considering, over this time frame that this is 7 weeks, they waited 2.5 weeks for the email, which, all right, that might be a bit long. And then they tried to ring and it didn't get an answer. But there's no mention, did they try and leave a voicemail? Did they try and get in contact with anyone else? It just seems very odd that they wouldn't try and get in contact again. It does say the case remained open, so that implies that it didn't just go away. They didn't just dismiss it. But I'd argue maybe they could have got in touch a few more times. Tim Davie did say in one of his interviews that, over the last 6 months, I think it was, the BBC has had around 250 of these complaints, like relating to allegations and stuff, and the complaints team obviously has to do a thorough investigation. The corporate investigations team even have to do a thorough investigation as to whether are these claims legitimate, is there evidence to support it, etc., etc. They've kept this case open, which some would take maybe as implying something was there, but again, we don't know. That's all that's been revealed in the timeline. So that was revealed after, during a bunch of statements that Tim Davie has given, like, throughout the day. He's been very, very busy. He did appear on Radio 4 to obviously get interviewed about all this, and, similar sort of thing happened. And it says the first conversation with the presenter wasn't until last Thursday. So on the 6th of July, The Sun informs the BBC via the press office of allegations concerning a presenter. Source of the claims was from the same family as approached by the BBC on the 18th and 19th. It's the first time the DG or any executive directors were aware of the case. Clearly, the corporate investigations team don't submit accusations up to the Director General. I guess you go through like a manager first, and the Director General is maybe like the top person you go to. Again, I don't know the inner workings of the BBC. So the same day the Sun notifies them, they launched an incident management group involving senior BBC execs, including the DG. The same day the senior manager holds the first conversation on the matter with the presenter concerned. And I think having a senior manager talk to them first rather than the Director General makes sense, because, you don't go straight to your CEO. If things escalate, then sure, go to the DG. But I think a senior manager is a right call there. The 7th of July, the corporate investigations team contact the complainant again, who was in touch with the BBC's investigators, and then they also make contact with the police. The complainant sends the BBC some materials related to the complaint on the 8th and 9th of July. So they've supposedly sent the material related to this complaint. Again, materials, that could be anything. That could be anything from text messages, WhatsApp messages, to the alleged, maybe like sexually explicit or charged photographs. We don't know. Materials covers a whole broad spectrum there. And then on the 9th of July, the BBC confirms the presenter is suspended. And on the 10th of July, which was yesterday, the day I'm recording this, the BBC has met the police. And the police have actually asked them to halt their investigation for now. Just they want to do some scoping, as they call it, I guess, take over things for themselves to try and ascertain just, what the hell is going on. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening. But just to round off, this says, what did we learn from the Director General's interview? Some key points. Tim Davies says the BBC's corporate investigations team decided the allegations were serious after assessing the first phone call to the corporation, which was 29 minutes long. Okay, so they're saying the phone call did happen with the complainant. However, the DG says the BBC may need to learn lessons and look at whether it raises red flags quick enough. Again, well, I do think if you thought it was serious enough, you definitely should have, I'd argue, maybe got in touch with them more than just twice. I don't know why you just do one email, one phone call, and then, yes, the case is open, but I think maybe you could have got in touch with them more. Davey acknowledged that the police need to do their work. He says he doesn't know whether the presenter in question paid for the young person's legal fees. Said that's not a matter for the BBC, because that's another point I forgot to mention earlier, that whilst the young person has this lawyer that's relaying through them, the young person's only 20. It's not been clear that if the young person's paying for that themselves, if someone is paying that on their behalf. Of course, people have jumped to the alleged accused presenter of paying for the lawyer for them. We don't know that as of yet. The Director General says it isn't odd that he hasn't spoken to the presenter. I agree with that. The BBC chief also admits that the allegations are damaging to the BBC, of course, but says the corporation is making the right calls, balancing between duty of care, privacy, and a serious allegation. You are really balancing a lot of things until more work is done by the police, until more is uncovered, until more is discovered. The BBC is really between a rock and a hard place. They're caught right in the middle. As it says, they've got to balance duty of care, not just for the accused presenter, not just for the alleged victim, but for all of the staff who work at the BBC, those who are appearing in the firing line, the privacy issue that we touched on, and obviously the allegation itself. So I do understand where he's coming from on that sort, but yeah, the BBC is in a very tricky spot with this. Just one final update here. The time is literally 4:15 in the afternoon, less than 2 hours before I plan to put this video out. But this just shows that this story is honestly moving all the time. New developments are happening, and I wanted to try and get it all into one video. It's been revealed, it says BBC presenter sent abusive and menacing messages to a second young person. This is a pretty damning update. It says a young person has told BBC News they felt threatened by the BBC presenter at the centre of a row over payment for sexually explicit photos. The individual in their early 20s was first contacted anonymously by the male presenter on a dating app. They say they were put under pressure to meet up but never did. When the young person hinted online they might name the presenter, they were sent abusive, expletive-filled messages. Speaking to the BBC, the young person, who has no connection to the person at the centre of the Sun story about payments for photos, said they had been scared by the power the presenter held. They said the threats made in the messages had frightened them, and they remain scared. The new allegations of menacing and bullying behaviour by the high-profile presenter raise fresh questions about his conduct, and it certainly does. Before we get into that, it says BBC News has contacted the presenter directly and via his lawyer, but has received no response to the latest allegations. My guess is the lawyers will have told this presenter not to say a damn word before anything more comes out. Yeah, this is particularly damning. In the first one, there hadn't necessarily been a hint of what it phrases here, as abusive, expletive-filled messages like menacing Whereas now, if it's implying it's the same presenter as this other person, so that adds a whole new dimension to the original accusations. Again, at the current time I'm recording this, and who knows, this may change, but at the current time, these still remain allegations, accusations, but it doesn't necessarily paint this presenter, who we still don't know, in a very good light. This second young person says, after the two had first connected on the dating app, the conversation moved to other platforms, and at this stage, the presenter revealed his identity and told the young person not to tell anyone. Later, the young person alluded online to having contact with a BBC presenter and implied they would name him at some point. The presenter reacted by sending a number of threatening messages, which BBC News has seen. Right, okay, well, if BBC News themselves has seen it, again, this is the BBC being impartial, not holding back, no fear or favour to themselves, that would imply then that the story is, has a bit more evidence to it. Again, just like The Sun said they'd seen evidence, this is the BBC saying it. Me, the rest of the public, Joe Blogs, we have not seen anything, messages, etc. But again, should this be true, these messages are correct, then this is pretty damning, not just on the presenter, but on the BBC as a whole. BBC News has been able to verify that the messages were sent from a phone number belonging to the presenter. Oh boy. And considering the BBC as like a news organisation, arguably across the world is one of the organisations that strives for verification. They have a whole thing, BBC Verify, which tries to cut out all the noise and mess of like fake news, AI-generated stuff, deepfakes, all of that. If they're saying they're verifying this number, that to me sends a pretty bad signal that this could have potentially happened. The young person's online post has also been seen by BBC News. So yes, this second one. Now, this seemingly has been brought to the BBC's attention now. Obviously, it mentions earlier that this young person made like a post on social media indicating they'd out the presenter. It's not clear yet whether the BBC or anyone within the BBC, such as not just the presenter in question, but any managers or anyone, it's not disclosed if anyone saw that at the time. They don't give a time frame as to when the young person posted that. So this all seems to be new information. I do wonder if Tim Davies going to appear on telly again today discussing this, because some would argue this is actually more damning. In the first case, you have, as mentioned, you have the young person who is denying that any criminality, any wrongdoing took place, whilst you've got their parents saying that it did, and the son claiming that they've seen evidence. But with this one, this is being revealed directly by a young person who, again, is seemingly at the other end of these abusive, menacing messages that BBC News has seen. They've verified the phone number belongs to the presenter. So, again, I do want to stress, because I think it is very important, at this moment in time, I'm recording this, everything still remains as allegations and the thing is, until the evidence becomes public or any more major details becomes, I'd still want to be very careful, again, like I've said throughout the video, be very careful about what you post on social media regarding who this could potentially be or your thoughts on the situation. But yeah, I just wanted to make a last little update with this new information, this second young person coming forward, because this, honestly, man, again, if BBC News have claimed that, they've seen these messages, they've verified the phone number, again, a presenter who's part of their organisation, that's pretty big. And I think this is only going to heat up over either today or the coming days. But yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts on it. I wanted to catch you all up on, maybe for those who weren't aware of the timeline of events and what exactly has been happening. Where's this going to go? I haven't got a Scooby-Doo where this is going to go, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. But either way, if even as allegations, to put this to the BBC again after what's happened in the past, this is pretty bad for them. Pretty bad. But yes, let me know what you think of all this situation in the comments. Again, be very careful what you write on social media. Don't be trying to basically defame anyone, because there's very much the chance that they could come after you and you'll be in the sticks of it as well. So be very careful what you write, both in YouTube comments or on social media as a whole. But I do want to know your thoughts on this story. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV, and until the next one, I will see you guys next time.
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Hooks Media, Ben Freeman, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Traffy, Liam Domain, and Keith Myers, our AMTV staff members.